security exercises and threat models. What we're going to be talking about today is how to build a security exercise, how to run a security exercise, how to use a security exercise repeatedly, time and time again, to drive up our security posture. This is a blue team talk. This is for IT operations, security operations. Those of us who are in charge day in and day out to protect our organizations, to keep the bad guys out and keep the good guys running in the business. So we're not going to do any high-level exploits. We're not going to do any advanced penetration techniques. We're going to talk about how to protect an organization. So if you're in the room for that reason, you're in the right spot. If you're in the room to troll me, you're probably in the right spot. I think that's... everyone raise their hand so I can avoid you. That's also why I asked for the lapel mic, so I can duck if anything comes flying. I love the GrrCon traditions. So my name is Wolfgang Gorlick. I tweet a lot, I blog a lot. I'm at jwgorlick and jwgorlick.com. I really love the security community. I really love the security practice. I'm involved with the MISA community, the B-Sides Detroit, OWASP Detroit, Converge. It's a great deal of fun working with you guys, sharing what you guys are doing, sharing what I'm doing, and learning from each other and pushing things forward. Today, though, I've been doing more management, right, unfortunately. I've been doing more on the process side. I've been spending more time securing environments with Excel rather than with firewall configs. So I will actually put up pictures of Excel. You know, prepare for the sexy. I love my Excel. But that's the neither here nor there. So what we're going to do today is we're going to look at Excel, we're going to look at security exercises, put it all together, and share how to put together a program for it. But first, let's talk about the problem, right? What is the problem we're trying to solve? Very simple. If you're blue team for a mid-market company, right? Mid-market, say you got maybe a couple hundred users, maybe 50 million to 150 million revenue. You got a small IT team, maybe 5, 10 people. Some of those people are probably responsible for security. You may even have a security team with a couple people. This is like my hometown, right? This is where I grew up. This is where I came from. I spent 6, 7 years at a financial company just like this, securing them and securing their application development and IT ops. And it's a lot of companies, right? It's everyone's small hometown. I looked at LinkedIn. There's over 10,000 companies, first and second connections that I'm connected to that fit this profile. So we're out there, right? We're out there. We're trying to protect organizations. And the good news is also the bad news. The good news is we don't get breached that much. A major security incident in a company that size happens maybe every 18 months. It's not happening all the time. Now, granted, we got CryptoLocker and malware, and Jane Doe shared her password, and someone stuck a sticky note with the keys to the castle on the front door. But the major security incidents, what we're trying to defend against, doesn't happen that much. That's good news because, hey, we can rest a little bit easier compared to what you hear in the press. It's bad news because when it does happen, where are we at? We haven't been seeing them every day. We haven't been experiencing them every day. We're out of practice. We're rusty. We don't necessarily know how to respond. And that leaves us in a spot where we're like stuck with this terrible media depiction of the bad guys, right? The guys with the ski masks are out to get us. We don't necessarily know what's behind the ski mask. We don't necessarily know what the tactics they're going to use are. That's no fun. And worse, some of these people even go to conferences like GrrCon. Someone here is going to attack my network. I know it. So that's the first part of the problem, right? We don't know. We don't know what we don't know. And what do we do to counteract that? Well, you talk to anyone who's a blue team, they'll tell you we're doing lots of planning, we're doing lots of controls, we're doing lots of layers, we're implementing security everywhere we can, we're looking at every device we have, we're trying to figure out how to harden it down. We're gathering all these logs, we're putting them all in one bucket. And that gets to the proverbial needle in a haystack of needles, right? I know that evidence of my compromise is in there somewhere, but trying to find it. No idea. I don't know what I'm looking for. It's really easy after the fact, after the breach, to figure out, oh, it's there. Not so much beforehand. So not only do we not know, we're not necessarily equipped for these breaches, for these rare occurrences of these advanced attacks. So we got this idea, we're in this community, we're in charge of our destiny, right? We're having a good time, us and our team of 6 IT people, we're jumping together, and life is good. But the reality is a little bit more like this. That's how I felt when I was in that role. Right? We're not ready. We're not ready. And it hurts. And to add insult to injury, we got the security by headline, right? Where our senior executive in our company comes to us and says, hey, Wolf, I just read about this breach at, headline X. Are we ready for that? And we go, kinda, I think. I know we're doing lots of stuff that should prevent that from happening. We don't necessarily have a framework to explore these headlines and to know what our actual posture is to prevent them from happening. So that's the problem. So I had two insights, two light bulbs went out that came together that a few years ago led me to a good solution for this. And the first one was I was doing a podcast for my second for B-Sides Detroit. One of the guys I interviewed, I think this was 2, maybe 3 years ago, he's like, an APT, right, these advanced attacks. An APT is like an act of nature, like a fire or a tornado. We just cannot plan for it. I'm like, yeah, you're so right. Things are terrible, it's horrible. Fire could strike any minute. I'm trying to sleep, and I don't know if the Chinese are conspiring with the Russians and Snowden, and everything's going to get me. Shell shock, whatever. But then I started thinking, well, wait a minute. After I calmed down and thought about this, that doesn't even make sense, right? I come from the business continuity world, and we do plan for fires. We do plan for tornadoes. We do this all the time. Why? Because we roll everything up, categorize by risk, and then we say, okay, for this given risk, we're going to do these things. We're going to contact these people. Here's our process. Here's our run book. And then we run it, right? We run it as an exercise, regularly, routinely. So I started thinking, wait a minute, why can't we do BCP for APT? Why can't we take what we've learned in the past 20 years and apply it to incident management? So that was idea number one. Idea number two comes from all you guys in the room. It comes from this quote that I love. I love this quote. I live by this quote. When you're following your energy and doing what you want all the time, the distinction between work and play dissolves. If you guys talk to me, if you guys follow me on Twitter, you know the distinction between my work and play is really, really blurry. I love that. I love this community. I love hanging out with us. And let's face it, we are a little strange. Just a little. I love Jimmy Bo. I wish he was here. But we are a unique breed of people. We have unique passions. We have unique ideas. We really get into what we're doing. It's what fuels us. It's what keeps us going. It's what makes this all worthwhile. It's why you guys are all here, right? We're not here just because. We're here because we love it. So if you take the intersection of those two, what we've done with business continuity for years and years, and what we love to do and why we got into security in the first place, and you look at the intersection of passion and practice, that's where work and play dissolves. That's where we can get a lot of fun. And that's where I would posit that we should put security exercises. So about 3 years ago, I really started drilling into this concept of how we can make things fun, how we can make things repeatable, and how we can leverage what we know from business continuity, and came up with these exercises. Now, let's just focus on the weight bench for a minute. Anyone here lift weight? Yeah, all right. So, awesome. More people should raise their hands. Great stress relief. So, imagine this if you would. You come up to someone and you're like, hey, how you doing? Oh, that's great. I lift weight. That's awesome. You're a weightlifter? Yeah, absolutely. I read every single issue of Men's Magazine. Okay, that's good. That's kind of creepy, but that's good. He goes, yeah, and I bought all this fancy equipment. And I expensed it. All right. Yeah, and you know what? The other day I was hanging out with these weightlifters, and they were giving me all these tips, and they were telling me all this cool stuff they do, and it was awesome, and I'm going to go to a weightlifting conference. Cool. Okay. Have you hit the gym yet? No. But I'm ready. Would that guy be able to lift weight? I mean, if he was put on the stage, say, here, lift this, would he? No. Come on. No. You read about it? Really? No. It's ridiculous. But yet, oftentimes, that's exactly what happens in the blue team, right? We love security. Awesome. We read about it all the time. That's great. We went to a conference and we hung out with some red team pen testers. Cool. Did you practice anything? No. But I buy this cool box. It's shiny and blinks. Awesome. See, mental muscle and physical muscle is the same thing, right? If you're not doing repetition, if you're not doing exercise, if you're not building on it, neuroplasticity is no different than your biceps. You're not going to get anywhere. And I think that's, unfortunately, what happens. We don't build. We don't get ready. And then 18 months happen, and we're looking at a bunch of logs, and we have no idea what we're looking at. So, how can we build a security exercise so we can start building some mental muscle? Let's pretend it's October. That should be pretty easy. Let's pretend we have 2 days in October, and we're going to do an exercise. This is the 2-day model that I've been using very successfully for a few years now. And I'll walk through the 2-day model at a high level, and then we'll return to it, and I'll actually give a full example of one of these exercises. So, step 1, landscaping. Side note, don't Google landscaping. I'm just going to stick with my picture of my lovely rocks in the pond. All right, threat, I don't even know. What would you even call threat landscaping these days? There's got to be a better term for it. It's the buzzword, though. What is the threat landscape? What does the real world look like from an attacker's perspective? Where are they attacking? What are they doing? We need to know that. So day 1 in the morning, we gather our stakeholders, people from IT ops, asset owners, people from IT security, small company, you're talking maybe 10 people in a conference room. Give them a good breakfast, and give them a presentation walking through what the real world attacks look like. Because without that real world data, we have no idea what we're looking for, right? We have no idea what we're trying to defend against. So we'll start there, education. Some sources for this, recent security incidents. There's been a security incident since the last time that you've had a security exercise or at all. That's a great thing to pull in and walk everyone through and explain what really happened. Because in the heat of the moment, no one knows, right? All I know is that we got BitLocker and FBI and blah, blah, blah. Okay, let's break it down. Let's walk step through step what really happened and figure out what we could have done differently. Recent pen tests are good for this too. If you're using third-party pen testers, pro tip, ask them for a threat model. Yeah, you broke our network. That's great. Give us a report. That's awesome. But in part of that report, give us a threat model that we can use to educate our team on what happened, what the exact steps and tactics were used. Because this is critical. Let's educate people on the tactics, tools, and techniques that attackers are using. Headline news breaches, of course, because everyone's going to ask about it, so we can walk them through and take a look at Target, Kmart, Jimmy John's, whoever. And conference presentations, right? Everything we're learning here, great material to walk through in a threat landscape. Here's some of the new cutting-edge talks. So if you think about it as a security exercise, that means GrrCon is your warm-up. We're warming up here, people. Start doing sit-ups or jog or something. No, I'm kidding. But the output of this is pretty simple. We want to get behind the mask, right? We want to take the mask off the attacker, get behind it, figure out what they're really doing, and educate people. And out of that morning, come to consensus within the room. What is the scenario we want to dig deeper on? What is the scenario most of the people in the room are interested in? What is the scenario that has the biggest business impact? What is the scenario that is relevant to the organization is most likely to occur? So likely, impactful, and you got engagement from the people in the room. Because we want to keep them excited, we want to keep them engaged throughout those 2 days. So we select that scenario, and then we begin to pull it apart. We break it down, and we model it out. Now, when you do a threat model, many different ways to do it. You can do kill chains, research, whatever way you want to do it. In this particular talk, I'm going to be looking at the MISEC threat model, which basically breaks the attack down and looks at the various tactics. So you walk people through what the attack looks like very specifically. And again, it's very important to maintain buy-in. One of the exercises I was doing, conference presentation was the source. It was actually Dave Kennedy's System Center talk that he gave out at DEF CON. And just so happened the organization was going through and they're upgrading System Center, so it was very timely. And we had everyone in the room. And, you know, pushback, you always hear about pushback. This was literal pushback. We sat down, okay, step 1 in the threat model. Bad guy sends, you know, phishing email to System Center admin. Our stakeholder literally pushed away from the table, crossed her arms, and she goes, "This is ridiculous." Okay, what's ridiculous? She goes, "No one is going to know that we run System Center." And I could have argued, right? We could have argued about security through obscurity, or could have argued 10 different ways to get people engaged. But the key here is maintaining and gaining buy-in, right? And keeping momentum. So I'm like, okay, that's interesting. No one would know. All right. So how would someone know? Well, and so I'm like pausing a little bit, thinking about it. How would someone? So well, we had the conference room, right? So I'm staring at the screen. I go, well, one thing they might do is OSINT, which in our case is Google. So if you think about Google and open up Google and say, company name, System Center, pages of results. Top 3 were my favorite. Number 1, LinkedIn page to someone claiming to be a System Center expert who is on their team, but not in the room. Number 2, someone who was in the room, who's also, no one's going to know, who had put, yeah, I'm implementing System Center in his LinkedIn. But the 3rd was my favorite. The 3rd was beautiful. A case study, an official case study on Microsoft's webpage about how the company was implementing System Center and saving money. Did I get her buy-in back? You better believe it. She comes to the table, she goes, see, starts lecturing everyone in the room, including that guy on LinkedIn. You gotta be careful, because people do, what did you say? OSINT. Yeah, OSINT. Everyone remember that. Don't put stuff out there. Good. So step 1, OSINT. Step 2, they fish your guy. Yeah, that's right, they'd fish our guy. So we really need to educate people, and we really need to get them to buy in, because otherwise we just don't know, right, as your internal. So we break down all the tactics, and then we get to step 2 in the afternoon of day 1. Step 2 is all about figuring out what controls we have. It's a tabletop exercise with the asset owners in place, the IT people in place, the security operations people in place. All right, the attacker does this, what do you do? The attacker does that, what do you do? The attacker does this other thing, would you be able to see it? Would you notice? And you walk them through, and as a collective, they educate each other on what controls are in place or are missing. And it becomes a great way also to identify the possibility for rolling out new controls. So you threat model, and then we tabletop. Right? Because without studying the offense, we can't plan for a good defense. And that's what we're trying to do here. As part of the threat modeling, we want to discuss with IT security. I already covered that. We want to review attack scenario and break it down to tactics. With the tabletop, we're looking at the existing controls that they have and potential controls that they may not have in place yet. And this last part becomes pretty critical because, especially if you get the right people in the room, and especially if you're an IT organization where you're doing lots of upgrades, there's always the potentiality of putting in these controls as part of a new project. One threat model we did identified several different aspects that could be caught or detected or prevented with Windows settings. And it just so happened that they were in the process of planning out a Windows Server upgrade and updating Active Directory. So this threat model became feature requirements for that project. Without having to increase the security team budget, without barely increasing the project time, a couple percentage points on project time, they were able to implement all the security controls necessary to defend against that particular abuse case because we hit them at the right time because it was part of an existing engagement. So it's all about timing out and figuring out how you can get those potential controls in place. Some of the outputs. Know the enemies, right? What are the tactics and evidence we're going to see? Know ourselves. How can we control for this? And then we're going to select an exercise. Coming out of that afternoon, we're going to pick either part of that model or the entire model, or even say, hey, look, this brings to light some other controls we just put in place, and those are the ones we're going to execute and exercise on. And that becomes day 2. So that afternoon of day 1, you plan out day 2. This is the human life-size game of mousetrap. I love that. It makes the circuit on all the maker fairs, and you got the ball, right, and it comes down this spiral thing, and it shoots over here, and it flips down these stairs, and it shoots up there, and it goes around, hits the bathtub and falls, and smashes the car. I love that thing. Whenever I think about a security exercise, this is how I think of it, right? We've got a predefined path, we're following the ball, we're putting it through all the various different systems, and we're watching what happens. And at the end, we smash someone's car. No, I would like to do that too, but that's probably not a good idea. See, without exercising the defense, we have really no assurance of whether it works, right? We really have no idea if control works if you don't test. And there's several great examples, easy examples that I've seen, some real photos. Locked doors, right? That's the classic. So, hey, we've got locked doors. That's awesome. I can guess what that passcode is. Sometimes they make it even easier. Sometimes they just put the password right on the door for you. I love that. Labels. I hate labels. More security controls have been defeated by labels than anything else, I think. If we could just end labels today, we won't have to smash anyone's car. Because, true story, talking to a director, he's like, yeah, we got a really secure environment. That's awesome. Yeah, we encrypt everything. Fantastic. Yeah, we got USB drives and BitLocker and everything's done, and the computer's lock in 5 minutes, and blah, 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 blah. And everything goes to sleep, so you got to put the BitLocker key back in. I mean, that is fantastic. Good for you. Good controls. So I was walking the floor, and I was talking to the developer, and I actually had to use his computer for part of the assessment. I said, can I borrow your computer? He goes, absolutely. He goes, sometimes our security people are crazy. It's like 5 minutes you're going to have to type in a code if you walk away from it. So if you look at what's on this keyboard, There's our BitLocker pin if you need it. Just type that in. I hate labels. But those are the easy examples, right? Doors, locks, and computers. Those are things you can see. What about the controls you can't see? What about if you're told in the security function that, hey, we have network segmentation? That's awesome. But when you go to look, it's open for all VLANs, to all IPs, to all ports. Not so awesome. What if you're told, hey, look, this guest wireless is secure. The only thing we allow out is the internet. That's fantastic. And you go and look, and the way they allow the internet is to put an Active Directory domain controller with DNS. Thank you. Our pen tester took all of about 5 minutes to find that. You know, control after control after control. GPOs, right? We've got these fantastic GPOs. Oh, the GPOs have been broken in Active Directory and they're not being propagated to half the servers. Time and time again, controls that look fantastic when you're doing a tabletop fail when you're actually looking at them. Fail under scrutiny. So we've got to exercise them. And that's what we do, right? Security exercise, again, we do it with IT and IT security. Ideally, the exercise should be something very simple, right? Something that an IT person could perform themselves, something that does not need a pen tester. You don't need a third party to do this, something that's low risk. We're going to test specific controls along that path and also look at the impact of missing controls. Because another area of pushback you'll get is you get the Linux guy who goes, oh, I don't need to worry about that control because I'm running Linux. Yes. By demonstrating not having that control and the impact of it, you can say, yeah, you don't have that control, and that allows these 4 other things in the chain. It may not directly impact you, but if you look at the entire path, this is how they're getting by you. So, again, maintaining that buy-in, demonstrating, educating throughout the entire process. The outputs is demonstrating defense in depth. I'll come back to that. That's pretty critical, defense in depth. And after action report on the defenses, how do we do? How do we stack up? And that report, if you looked at a headline breach, is exactly how you'd answer the news by headline, right? Hey, are we prepared for this breach? Yes, we are. Here's the tabletop exercise and the security exercise we ran on it. And here's what we need to do to be even better. So after action report, assurance on our existing controls. Do they really work, or did someone label it and bypass it? And then recommendations and assistance on how to build new controls. So that is your October. 2 days. 2 days to build an exercise, to get tight, and to improve things. 2 days to figure out what your real posture is to a real threat and how your organization would respond. And give them a chance to practice against a real threat and be prepared for that rare actual advanced attack that's going to hit you. Of course, exercising, you can't just do it once, right? You want to build the incident response muscle by doing it again and again and again. In the business continuity world, we do that quarterly generally. Right? We have drills every quarter to make sure that we have readiness. I suggest we do the same thing in incident response. This is generally what we recommend for clients and what I did in my last job. So January, April, July, October, doing it again and again and again, looking at what's happened between those exercises, bringing them to light and educating everyone on them, looking what's changed between the exercises, and acting accordingly. And you build this as part of your process. You build this as part of your practice. If you're in a vendor risk world, right, where you're reporting in incident management, you're now in a much better spot because you can say, here's our list of how many exercises we've ran. We test it every quarter. Significantly better in terms of vendor risk management. And depending on the client, that could even be a competitive advantage, right? Just like business continuity can be a competitive advantage, which is awesome for communicating with your leadership team about why we're doing this at all. This can also become part of your build process. So we got a new system coming. We're going to do a security exercise at the end of it around just the functionality that new system offers. So you can do it quarterly, you can do it out of cycle as part of the ongoing maintenance and support of IT. So you build it in, you bake it in, you do it again and again and again. So let's give an actual example. Well, before I do that, any questions on the overall process? No one's got questions. Cool. So I'm going to give an actual example with some threat models. So day one, the landscape. We're going to talk to them about, hey, what have we recently seen in your environment? Two common scenarios would be something like malware and insider threats. We say, all right, Common malware. What does the malware look like? Well, if you think about the attack we recently had, here's what it looked like. We had some branch offices. They're connected back to our data center over a firewall and IPsec tunnel. That's awesome. Someone downloaded an email with a PDF attachment. Not so awesome. That attachment installed a rootkit. Rootkit started side scanning and infected some other computers. Also found additional PDFs in our file server, infected those, and pretty soon everyone got it. High level, here's what happened. Let's whiteboard it. Let's explain it. Pretty straightforward. The source, obviously common occurrence. When you're talking in an exercise, we might say this happened on this month. It attached this many users. Here's what we saw. Business relevance, people who it affected, right? Businesses affected. How long were we down? What was the cost we were exposed to? And attacker's objectives. How bad did they want to get us? How advanced was the attack? Obviously, in this case, not very advanced. They didn't really care. They're just spreading malware. Business relevance and attacker's objectives is pretty important in terms of determining, A, how important is it, and do we pass it on to, the rest of the exercise and pay very close attention to it? And B, how badly do they want to get us? Because how badly do they want to get us determines how advanced our controls need to be, right? Because we need more coverage the more advanced the attacker is. So that's malware. Let's talk about insider threat. Very simple. I got a guy, we thought he was great, but he's not so great. He's going after our files, after our SharePoint. Maybe we're in a merger and acquisition scenario. The guy's disgruntled. He's copying all his files because he thinks he's going to be let go. He's trying to get into the CFO's files because he wants to know who's going to get let go. He's accessing all sorts of things he shouldn't. He's kicking off all sorts of alarms. Again, pretty common occurrence, especially if an organization is going to shift into an M&A. We'd want to do this right at that shift point. Business relevance, well, he's going to have access to our files. That's not good. He may disrupt the merger if the permissions are not set correctly. And the attacker's objectives. He's going to try multiple different ways to get in, multiple different ways to get what he needs to get. So that brings us to tabletopping and doing the threat models. In MySec world, we call this an abuse case. So what abuse case is, about a paragraph in business relevance with any numbers that can dictate, impact and likelihood. Given the attacker's objectives, and then the attack path. The attack path is that Excel file, which I'll walk you through, that lists out what the attack would look like, stage by stage, everything from external recon to achieving the objectives. Now, these stages can vary, right? Because if you're insider threat, you're not going to need to do an external recon. You go right into internal recon. So we pick out the stages that we need, and then we list the tactics accordingly. So if you think about that malware, and you break it out, it'd be things like sending malicious email, right? User opens it, creating local admin accounts, installing rootkits, enumerating Windows drives, etc., etc. Each one of the tactics listed at a very high level in a way that can be explained to senior technologists, in a way that can be explained very simply. We don't necessarily need to detail how to install the rootkit or those types of things. Not at this level. Not when you've got asset owners and people in the room who are trying to educate, but we not necessarily want to pull them into the weeds. The next step is to walk through doing the tabletop and list the various controls we have in place. So we're able to block some email attachments. We're able to scan for vulnerabilities, which would help us eliminate those unpatched vulnerabilities. We got file level auditing, etc. We're listing DP, IP, those IP and ID get highlighted. We'll do the same thing for insider threat, right? So what are they going to do? They're going to try and copy some files that they don't have access to, copy files they do have access to, exfiltrate data. And again, we'll list the various different controls we have in place. File level permissions, disabled accounts, Active Directory logging, and some ideal controls such as exfiltrating company data, the ability to detect multiple amounts of data, unusually amounts of data being uploaded, or alerting on FTP traffic out. Perhaps we don't allow FTP traffic, that would be alerted. So those controls would be detective, right, time-based. How long will it take us not only to detect, log it, but respond to it. So log it, ship it to your security console, alert from your security console. Your security team has seen it, responded to it, notified the right person. Full time involved. So we want to list that too. I like high level, right, like weekly, daily, hourly. How long does it take to respond to those detection controls? And preventive, can we stop it? and again, ideal prevention and detection, which then gets highlighted in yellow, and that becomes some of our action items coming out of the exercise. These controls allows us to quantify our defense in depth, right? Our defense coverage, if we've got 10 tactics, and we've got 10 ways to detect it, 10 ways to prevent it, we've got 100% coverage. Awesome. Usually that's not the case. But the important thing here is defense in depth is relative, right? Depth is always relative to use. If you want to go diving in this pool, it's not deep enough. If all you're doing is swimming, it's fine, right? Depth is always relative to use. And the challenge here is because we don't know the use, because we don't know, getting back to the problem, as an inside security guy, what the actual attack will look like, we don't really know if they're diving or swimming. So oftentimes when I talk to people about their defense in depth, I get answers like, our defense in depth is deep and littered with the bones of our enemies. I'm like, wow, right on. Because that's what people believe, right? I mean, is there anyone in here who does not think that their IT people and security people are busting their ass day in and day out to secure their environment? No, that's what we believe. We see all the work they're doing. Well, other than you. But we see all the work they're doing, right? Jane spent all weekend implementing ACLs on the Cisco router, and Steve's locked down the servers, and Ken was up late last night fiddling around with Linux, and Sue's messing around with the firewall. We got all this defense in depth. That's awesome. That's awesome. Good for you. Looking at the red team side of things, it's not always as deep as they think. And we see this time and time again. Just not, right? Because they haven't planned for that particular use. So that's where we shift. That's where we shift from defense in depth to layer on layer security. You guys know layer on layer security? So we got all these IT guys doing all this work on these various layers to secure things that doesn't match up to any pen testers. And it's called layer on layer security because when the pen tester or the attacker comes, well, that's what they do. Good job. Good try, guys. You got chainmail on your cat. Awesome job. It's true. It's just the way it is, right? Great example. We were doing a pen test, and I was talking with our stakeholder, and he's telling me, we're going to get your guy. Like, you are. We are. That's awesome. No one ever gets our guy. How are you going to get him? Oh, this is great. You can't tell him, though. I won't say a word. So we set up a canary and a coal mine. Yeah, that's right. We did. We got this domain admin that has a very simple password that your guy will be able to guess. And I've told my guys, no one log into this account. And we got all the logging set up. So the minute anyone logs into this account, the console lights up like a Christmas tree. Right? The console lights up like a Christmas tree, the ball's going on, down comes the mousetrap, and we got your guy. That is awesome. That's also low security. It's a great layer, great layer. But you ask a pen tester if he's going to be randomly guessing people's passwords to see if they're domain admin, that's not the case at all, right? We're going to look at who's logged in, which is exactly what happened. He fired off responder, found 3 people logged in as the main DA, grabbed one of their hashes, and went to town. Did we touch that canary and coal mine account? No. No. But without knowing the use, without knowing what the attack the situation signature would look like, we have no idea, right? We're putting chainmail on a cat. So, now we get to day 2. We've broken down the tactics, now we're actually going to do some exercises. So, common malware, right? So we've got all our different controls listed. And what we'll do is we'll create an exercise for each one of these controls. Again, very simple exercises, things that the IT team can do, things the IT team are not concerned about. We're not telling people, hey, we're going to put Metasploit in your environment and start firing them off at your servers during production. That'd be bad. We're saying, hey, could you create a local user and see if we can detect that? Who's going to say no to that? Come on. Local user. Or open network browser. See if you can enumerate stuff. Modify a file. Very simple test. But each one of these tests corresponds to a control, and each one of the controls corresponds to the tactic. If the test passes, we can have a reasonable assurance that the tactic would fail. We do the same thing with insider threat. So, 30-minute workstation timeout, we'll leave a computer unlocked. Right? Detect when a large number of files are open, we'll copy a large number of files and make sure it's logged. Very simple ways to detect these things. So when we do this security exercise, it needs to be a realistic objective and tactic. That's going to happen if we've done day 1 right. It needs to model a real-world attack. Again, that's going to happen if we've done day 1 right. It needs to have measurable outcomes. how many of the controls passed or failed. And we should test not only the controls, I know I've said this once before, I'll say it again, we also need to test the response time, end to end. Do people know what they're doing? That's the muscle we're trying to build. Do they know how to respond, who to talk to, how to get it done? And it should be very simple stuff. AD authentication, attempt to log into a disabled account. True story. We did one of these security exercises with the company and went through and followed the whole model. Now, one of the pushbacks I'll often get is, well, Wolf, our advanced attackers or insider threats are not going to put a call into help desk and say, look, I'm going to attack you on Thursday. Can you please make sure your team's ready? And they're definitely not going to say, will you please send me your threat model so I know what steps I'm supposed to take? I couldn't agree more, right? Which is why you need adequate defense coverage. Because how accurate does someone need to be to a threat model to be caught? Is that 100%? 80? 50? How about 10? 10%, one of those controls. That's what happened, this exact control. So we did the model, we did the exercise for insider threat, followed the whole thing, right? And one of the controls that came out of it was logging into the disabled account and making sure that was going into their SIM tool and making sure the SIM tool was configured to report an alert on it. Some time goes by. We get a call. You remember that exercise we did? Remember how we set up monitoring for logging into disabled accounts? Yeah. The strangest thing happened. And we started talking, and he unwound it for me. And what had happened was someone got terminated, and their VPN connection got deleted. Now, through a quirk of this connection, and I swear I would throttle the manufacturer of this VPN software if I could, if you delete their VPN connection but they're connected to the VPN, what that does is it stops you from monitoring them. They're still connected. So they terminated them on Friday morning, deleted it. She went home. She's still at her computer at home. Her computer was still connected to the VPN. She spent the entire weekend on their network trying to get to files and servers and everything. And every time she did it, flipped off this particular use case. Every single time. So they started investigating. They looked into it. They figured out what happened. Of course, they got her off the network. But that was interesting to me because it met the profile, but only one of the controls, right? Only one single part. But it was close enough to that threat model, and it was close enough to when we had done this security exercise, the IT operations people went, that's weird, that's got to be insider threat, we're going to investigate that. And that's really all we're trying to do. I don't care if the model's only 5% accurate. If we've given the people inside, our people, enough knowledge to act and know what to do, we've won. We've won. So, that was fun. That was a good one. When we do the security exercise, there's several layers of maturity, right? So you got your threat model, you got various exercises, several layers you can go. Scavenger hunt is what I call just testing one or two of the controls. We're going to put the evidence in place, we're going to see if people can see it, right? So to that logging one, we're going to put the evidence in place. Did you see it? No, you didn't? Okay, let's work with you to figure out how you can see it next time. After you've done a few exercises, you've gotten a little bit better, you started building up some momentum, you can go ahead and run the full model, which I like to call hacker tag. You let the hacker go and see if anyone can tag him. Which is good, it's fun. Run the whole model, test every single control. Now you're going to hit controls that are in place, which means we'll have to loosen those controls to make sure that the entire path can be followed. Right? Which is fine. It's fun though. After you've gotten good at that, so now we've done one control, now we've done all the controls, now we want to race the clock. This is standard BCP 101, right? How fast can you recover? Start the clock, execute the model, time everybody, do it in your after action report. When you get to that point, you're getting really, really lean and mean. We can detect an insider threat in an hour, or whatever it may be, right? Get very lean, get very mean, get very fast. So some cautions with exercises. One is to select a realistic scenario. It's got to be something that everyone in the room will believe in. That's what you got to do on day one, right? Is convince everyone that this is realistic. And if they come into that room with their own scenarios that are not realistic, and you know that's, no, I'm sorry, Batman is not going to come through the window and then spray pepper gas. It's just, we're not going to test that. You also need to be able to reel them in if they bring in their own scenarios that are a little bit crazy and out of the wall. Next, you got to remember this is a test, and only a test. We want to do these in a low risk way. We want to maintain buy-in so we can do them quarter and quarter. So that means don't send infected files. If your threat model is, hey, they're going to go after the CFO's files, don't go after the CFO's files. Don't leave ports open. I've seen that happen, right? Because we're going to reduce some of those controls so we can follow the full path. When we reduce some of those controls to follow the full path, that's pretty important because, again, the attacker might not follow the full path. They may zigzag a little bit. Or, again, some of those controls may be present now but will fail later. So we need redundancy along the whole way. So we'll loosen those controls. We've got to remember to put them back in place. The key thing is we want to create the evidence of a security incident, but we do not want to create a security incident. Very important distinction there when you run your exercise. So do it right, plan it well, put your toys away afterwards, and document the hell out of it. Document the hell out of it because this document is going to be what gives your stakeholders the evidence to answer the question, are we ready for this breach? So it's going to give your stakeholders the capital they need to invest, to implement new controls, to do things better. Right? Document the hell out of it. So in conclusion, if you look at that junction, right, where work dissolves into play, you look at where practice meets passion, we put together a security exercise that's fun, that unmasks the attacker, that gets to the root of a real attack and gets beyond the news and the hype. And allows us to get ahead of the news headlines, right, and answer the question. And sometimes, too, the news headlines are pretty interesting and useful, even in different markets. One thing that happened is we did a security exercise for EDU, and they wanted to do Target. Okay, we can do Target. But you're not in retail. I know, but Target seems pretty cool. Okay, we'll do Target. So we start walking down Target. Okay, they did this, and this. And all of a sudden, one of the guys in the room gets kind of pale, a little bit pale. You know? Doesn't look quite healthy. Like, did I not put on enough deodorant? What's going on? And we say, well, what's up? You know, what are you thinking? He was like, well, did you just say they came in with the HVAC vendor? Yeah. He goes, it just occurred to me, and I'd forgotten about this, but it occurred to me that we set up our HVAC vendor on Windows XP on this notebook with PC Anywhere, and it's in our server room on our backbone. Yes! Let's address that. Those types of things can be very unexpected and very helpful, right? We never know by looking at any one of these attacks what of those tactics would actually apply to us, even if we're not in the retail space, even if we're not in the EDU space. So it's very interesting to look at the headlines, you know, and not dismiss them just because, well, I'm not carrying PCI data. Awesome. What about your HVAC? So we do these exercises 2 days at a time. Just to recap, we threat model. Use the MySec attack path. We do a risk evaluation. We walk through in a tabletop exercise, figure out what controls we have. That allows us to drive what we're monitoring, what we're hardening, reducing the amount of work we do, hopefully, just to the actual requirements that we need to defend against a few very specific abuse cases, and reduce the amount of work we're doing in logging. Because why log everything when you can be very, very specific and look for the exact abuses you want? So, threat model, tabletop. Out of that, we look at our individual controls, our mouse traps, and we exercise them. We run through them and test each one to make sure that they're actually working and make sure that people are responding. Get good at it. We can do it again and again as a race, time it, and build up our muscle. And that's how we do it again and again, 2 days at a time, 8 days a year, quarter after quarter, until we get really, really good at responding. So that when that one incident that happens every 18 months happens, we know what to do. We're not relying on a whole bunch of layers that maybe somehow have a canary effect. No, we know exactly how they're going to try and slice through our network, and we know where to stop them and how to defend against it. That's the goal of security exercises. That's the goal of building up this muscle, this practice, this discipline for incident response. So open it up to any questions, and here's my contact information. Yes, sir. So the question is loosening controls to get down the path, to make sure that it's a realistic exercise, but not dangerous. Why we want to do that is we always want control redundancy along the path, because controls will fail, as we know, or be bypassed. A good example is we've got a web application, we got a WAF. And this web application maybe has some SQL calls, maybe not. The WAF is going to be controlled to prevent that from happening. So for that exercise, specifically for our tester, we would disable the WAF so that we could then go on to the next step and see if we could breach that website.
Let's say hypothetically, from February to October, missed this cycle. And is it safe to assume at that point that my expenses will be penetrated?
Is it safe to assume if you've not done an exercise, you've been penetrated? I think it's never safe to assume you have been penetrated. Thank you very much. But clearly, we got to test. We have no idea. You know what I mean? How many times have you personally walked in and someone said, oh, it's very secure, and you look at secure, and you walk out, and they're like, now I can get back to work. All right? Bad things happen all the time to good people. Okay is relative. People can do this once a year. They can do it twice a year. It's no different than BCP drills, right? Sometimes you miss a quarter. Fine. I missed the gym for a week, but I'm fine. I haven't gained any weight. Yes, sir. How to get around the person who will not buy in? Do you have an example of a person not buying in? Okay, so you may have a guy who does not remember any security breaches, thinks it's a full hearing. Well, it's on us to convince him, right? Bring evidence of a recent breach. If there's been 6 years with no breach, that's very fishy. So you need to bring good evidence. You need to have a good story. You can sidestep it altogether to say, hey, I know we're really good and you do an awesome job, but look how these other people have screwed up. That's also good. Right? Because a threat model doesn't have to be about your company. It can be about any company. It can be about any scenario. Yes, sir. Right, so how do I go about documenting scenarios? I use Excel because I love Excel. Like this. I have a paragraph that describes what it means to the business, a paragraph that describes what it means to the attacker, a summary of what the attack looks like. People broke into Target, they stole credit card data. And then we list out the various tactics that they use to achieve that. So each tactic should be just one thing, right? So moving to a new role or social engineering as opposed to social engineering and then I did X. So break it up into very simple tactics and I separate those tactics into the stages of a breach. So you end up with a Word document and an Excel document. So the question is, do the exercises include working through your escalation chain? The answer is absolutely. Maybe not in the beginning, because you're still trying to get the team used to it, but definitely within the first 2 or 3, you absolutely want to work that escalation chain, because that response is what you're trying to build, right? So that people know, hey, sysadmin knows who I'm supposed to contact. And security guy knows, hey, based on these 3 things, I need to forward it onto the business, right? Those are the things that you want to test. This, again, I'm looking at business continuity as a model. And in business continuity, you've got your call tree, and that always gets exercised. It's the same concept. Yes, sir. Correct. Yep, as a maturity model, starting with one control, then all the controls, then the response time, then the communication path. Yes, absolutely. I think I have time for one more question if anyone has it. Once, going twice, yes. My slides are always like 50 meg. If you drop me an email, I will email you a link to them on Google. You got it. All right. Thank you all. Have a great GrrCon.